Guidance release. T-minus 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. We have ignition sequence has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 1, 0. And we have a liftoff. The Skylab lifting off the pad now, moving up. Skylab has cleared the tower.
Houston is now controlling.
On May 14, 1973, the mighty Saturn V moon rocket thundered into the skies above Florida for the final time. Its mission? Carry the Skylab, America's first space station, into a low Earth orbit where it could be used as a microgravity habitat and laboratory for American astronauts. As the Saturn booster separated and the space station reached orbit, telemetry beamed back from the station alerted ground controllers to a serious malfunction. What followed was among the greatest repair efforts in the history of manned spaceflight. The history of Skylab goes back to the early 1950s, when famed NASA engineer Wernher von Braun published a series of articles detailing a large rotating space station, where astronauts could live and work in space conducting experiments, studying Earth's weather patterns, conducting military surveillance, and performing astronomical observations. Over the next decade, this concept would evolve multiple times, eventually resulting in Skylab. In August of 1969, after years of engineering studies and refined conceptual designs, McDonnell Douglas was awarded the contract to convert a Saturn V third stage into the so-called orbital workshop, which would later become the Skylab space station. By May of 1973, Skylab sat atop a modified Saturn V rocket awaiting launch from Launch Complex LC-39A. On May 14, 1973, crowds watched what seemed to be a perfect launch as the rocket carrying Skylab climbed steadily into space, and after only 10 minutes, Skylab had reached its intended orbit. Feeling that the station was safely in orbit, ground controllers breathed a sigh of relief. Once the station was in space, it took about half an hour for the station to power up and begin deploying its antennas and solar arrays. A little under an hour after liftoff, Skylab began beaming down telemetry, and ground controllers soon realized something had gone horribly wrong. After careful analysis of data and telemetry beamed back from the station, engineers believed part of the station's sun and micrometeoroid shield had come off during the launch, destroying one set of solar panels and critically damaging another. Low on power and exposed to the sun, the temperatures inside Skylab began to climb well above the design tolerances. Ground controllers remotely maneuvered the station into an orientation which maximized the power generated by the solar panels located on the Apollo telescope mount, while minimizing the damaged area's exposure to sunlight. The Skylab 2 mission, meant to carry the first astronauts to the station and set to launch the next day, was immediately postponed, and a rescue mission was prepared by engineers to repair the crippled space station. Over the following days, engineers devised a sunshade to replace Skylab's missing micrometeoroid shield, while the astronauts were retrained and practiced the techniques needed to carry out the necessary repairs while on the ground. On May 25th, the Skylab 2 mission lifted off from Launch Complex LC-39B, carrying Commander Pete Conrad, science pilot Joseph Kerwin, and pilot Paul Weitz. Upon reaching the stricken space station, the crew flew their Apollo spacecraft around the station to inspect the damage. They confirmed part of the sun and micrometeoroid shield was missing, along with one set of solar arrays. They then noted that the other set of solar arrays on the opposite side of the station had only partially deployed. All power being generated by the station was coming from the solar panels mounted on the Apollo telescope mount, which had been deployed shortly after reaching orbit. The crew performed a soft docking with the station and prepared for their first attempt to open the remaining solar array. Commander Pete Conrad undocked the Apollo spacecraft and placed it in position near the damaged solar panel. While Conrad maintained the spacecraft's position, the command module was depressurized and Paul Weitz performed a stand-up EVA, leaning out of the hatch of the command module while fellow astronaut Joseph Kerwin held his legs to give him stability. Weitz tried to free the jammed solar panel by repeatedly tugging at it with a long hooked pole, but after a prolonged effort, and with the spacecraft beginning to enter the Earth's shadow, the crew realized they would not be able to deploy the panel. At this point, the crew attempted to redock with the station to finish their day. Unfortunately, when Conrad attempted to dock, the docking failed. After trying 2 backup procedures, the spacecraft still wouldn't dock. Flight controllers proposed a fourth docking attempt with the circuit breakers open, but this too failed. Faced with the inability to dock, the crew again depressurized the spacecraft and performed a spacewalk to repair the docking probe. On the fifth attempt, the spacecraft was finally able to complete a full docking with Skylab. After some rest, the astronauts began their second flight day by attempting to deploy the hastily fashioned sun shield. They entered the Skylab to find its interior temperatures had risen far above their normal operating limits. The crew struggled for 2 hours to deploy the sun shield from an experiment airlock, only to be met with disappointment when it only partially deployed. Though the shield was not fully deployed, the internal and external temperatures of the station cooled considerably over the following days, stabilizing at a warm, but tolerable, 79 degrees Fahrenheit. By May 29th, the crew began carrying out the experiments that had been planned for the mission, carrying out medical tests and solar observations. Though the station had cooled considerably, power consumption was still an issue. Over the following days, more of Skylab's batteries failed, further lowering the power output and bringing the integrity of Skylab's electrical systems into question. On the 7th of June, the astronauts performed a spacewalk and after much struggle were able to deploy the failed solar panel, greatly increasing Skylab's power output. With the station largely repaired, the astronauts were able to turn their attention back towards the planned experiments. After 28 days in space, the astronauts splashed down in the Pacific Ocean on June 22nd, concluding their successful mission and rescuing America's first space station. Hello, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed my first video relating to the history of spaceflight. Since this is the first time I've made a video like this, I would appreciate any comments or suggestions you think would improve the quality or accuracy of my future videos. I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and I hope you will watch some more of my content in the future. Thanks again, and ad astra.